The Oklahoma City Thunder get win number 60 by responding to a massive Sacramento Kings third quarter run. They withstood that run and won their 11th straight road game. We're going to break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show at LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're diving into win number 60 for the Oklahoma City Thunder, matching a franchise best 11th straight road win, and this really impressive win for a shorthanded Thunder team that had to withstand punches to get this win. We will have plenty of time to dive into the minutia of this game. It's what we do here at Locked On Thunder. We break down the nooks and crannies. If you're new to this show, we're talking pin down screens in the third quarter. We do all that stuff way more than most. But sometimes you have to take a step back. Sometimes you have to go back to move forward. And the big picture of just this season at large matters when you're talking about this individual game. Because it's thoroughly impressive that this team already has 60 wins. It's thoroughly impressive that this team has already clinched the number 1 overall seed. And the context behind it matters more than the third quarter run that we will get to. Before the season began, a lot of people picked the Thunder to be the best team in the West. You know, from just a pure talent standpoint, from a mixture of talent coupled with who amongst the most talented teams do you expect to take the regular season the most seriously, and on down the line. So they were a popular pick to be in this spot. Now, nobody went as far as to say that they would lap the field, right? Nobody went as far as to say that they'd be the best team in the NBA. Nobody went as far as to say that before the calendar turns to April, the 1 seed will be decided. In the middle of March, it was whenever they clinched it for the number 1 overall seed. And especially no one would have said that if you got the information that Chet Holmgren would be out from November 10th to February 7th. If you've got the information that Isaiah Hartenstein would miss the first 20 games of the season. If you had the information that Kenrich and Jay will start on the shelf. If you had the information that during even this stretch, down the home stretch of the season, you've been playing games without Chet. You've been playing games without J-Dub. You've been playing games without key pieces, and yet you keep on winning. And so I think that sometimes when you're just so narrowly focused on the day-to-day, the here and now, and the why that each individual game is won, you need to take a step back and look upon the context of how everything's stacked together, how it's all been strung together over the course of this regular season. Because I think that sometimes the Thunder get the wrong end of, well, this team was supposed to be number 1 overall seed. What's the big deal? Yeah, but you would have never picked them to be the number 1 overall seed if you knew all the context I just gave you when you were doing your season preview in the middle of October. You would have never picked this to happen. And tonight embodied all of that, where you go on the road against a Kings team fighting for their lives, however meekly you believe that they're fighting for the play-in tournament, but fighting for their lives, only down Malik Monk, who's a big deal, but one player's gone at this time of the year. You take that as a huge win. Meanwhile, the Thunder don't have Jalen Williams, J-Dub. They don't have Cason Wallace. They don't have Aaron Wiggins. They don't have Ousmane Dieng, but like 3 very important rotational pieces. And yet, they get a lopsided victory. We are able to raise the victory flagler at the end on the road after a barrage by Sacramento in that third quarter, where they slice a 25-point lead within single digits, and they're feeling good, and they're shooting the lights out of the gym, and Shea's having an off night to that point, and still didn't play his very best, right? But it was still a good game. And you're at home, and the crowd's into it, trying to propel you to a win, and it just didn't matter. Because what we've seen this entire season in various degrees, in various ways, is that this Thunder team is going to respond. I think that sometimes you look at how good they are, and from the outside looking in, you just assume, well, you know, they're a young team that's taking it more seriously than everybody else, and they're getting rewarded for it. They're lapping the field because they're the only ones trying, and discarding the adversity, the true blue adversity that they've gone through. And they went through tonight. Other NBA teams would have folded in that third quarter. Other NBA teams would have folded whenever Chet Holmgren broke his hip. Think of how many teams right now in the Western Conference are using injury excuses or are talking about how, yeah, you know, it hasn't been the best regular season, but we're going to turn it on in the playoffs. Don't worry about us. You know, in the playoffs, lights are bright. We're going to get there. The Thunder would have had those same excuses. And for a team who was picked, you know, granted, they were picked by many to be the one seed again. They were picked by many to be the one seed again in the same scope of how they were the one seed last year, where they didn't get the one seed till the last day of the season, in large part due to tiebreaker, in large part due to Hail Mary in San Antonio. But they've lapped the field. And they've taken all of that adversity and they've responded to it. They responded to in-game adversity tonight. They responded to season-long adversity throughout the year to get to this point. You know, how crazy is it that on February 7th was the first time that Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein were able to step on the floor together? And your most played lineup, 4-man lineup, Shea, J-Dub, Chet, Hartenstein. A lineup you didn't even have available to you until a little over a month ago. And oh yeah, by the way, in this tad bit over a month stretch, Chet's been resting back-to-backs. Guys have been in and out of the lineup. And it's still up there as your most played lineup. Partly that's due to Mark's, you know, wants and strategy of, you know, rotating lineups and making sure that you've left no stone unturned. Part of that's due to everyone's been in and out to where you can't have a fastball lineup, so to say, or a lineup that you've like built up a huge lead on a group that again was not together until a little over a month ago. But the key part about it is, while it does hurt the Thunder to not have Wiggins and Wallace and J-Dub tonight, they are top to bottom the best team in the NBA. They're top to bottom the most talented and the deepest team in the NBA, and they win like they are. They win as such. And so I just find it fascinating how good this team is. And you will look back on this team as the best team in Thunder history. And you don't want to not embrace, not enjoy, not relish, not savor these moments the way you should. Because one day this will end. Now, the end is not in sight because of how young these guys are, because of how many picks that they have, because of the way that they've strategized and set themselves up to keep all these guys, even with the new CBA. The end is not in sight, but one day the end will come. And in 20 years from now, this will be the best team in Thunder history. And you will have wished that you spent more time enjoying it and knowing that you're in the good old days. You're in the good old days right now. Right this second. And I think that there's partly a brush off that we've talked about. There's partly even from people who are acknowledging how good they are, and now we're speaking internally with like local fans and fans who are all around the world that love this team and that they know how good this team is and they watch this team every night. Even some of you are watching this team with a little bit of a guarded approach of like, well, what about May and June? Let May and June be May and June, right? Let May and June be May and June. This team deserves all the accolades, all the respect, all the hype, all the flowers, all the acknowledgement, all the appreciation for what they've done. Because again, this is the best it's going to get. I mean, it really is. You can put together hypotheticals of how good this team would have been if they were all healthy and all able to play all 82 games, but this is what NBA teams deal with. And how you respond to these injuries that the cards they've been dealt this year, how you respond to that is what makes up your reality, is what makes up your situation. And this team's responded to all those adverse things exceptionally well to get to this point. And so there's all these little milestones and all these little steps that you need to take that require reflection. And I think that this is one that does, getting to the 60-win mark and being on the precipice of winning your most games in franchise history. They need one more win to be the winningest team in franchise history. Pretty good stuff. Coming up, let's talk this Kings game, though. The third quarter run from Sacramento, how the Thunder withstood it, how the Thunder built their big lead, and ultimately still got a lopsided win. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at Game Time, go check out Game Time today because there's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy from the crowd, the sound of the sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. You know, we saw George Kittle in Oklahoma City not too long ago. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. Make sure you go there right now and have the peace of mind that you are going to get your view from your seat before you buy. That way, you know if you like that vantage point or not. No surprise fees and the lowest prices guaranteed. You can book with total confidence at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app today. Create your account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create your account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Go download the Game Time app. What time is it? It's game time. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Here talking with you all about Thunder Kings and this Thunder season at large. We do the show Monday through Friday, plus weekend post-game shows, plus our Locked On NBA roundtable, which we had yesterday. So go back and listen to that. Where we have it yesterday was the entire NBA that was able to join us. So we were talking with Locked On Cavs and everyone else. Usually every week will be Locked On Western Conference squad shows where we're talking with other West Conference hosts. In this game, the Thunder grew a 25-point lead. And the lead only changed hands once and saw two ties. The lead change and the ties were both in the first quarter at the very beginning of the game. From there, the Thunder never let go of the rope. They never lost the lead. They never were overtaken by Sacramento, but Sacramento did throw you a massive haymaker out of halftime, where the Thunder just couldn't get anything going offensively. You know, Shea was getting mauled at the rim with no calls, and they could not buy a bucket at times in that third quarter. And the Kings went on the 13-0 run. And they were able to slice the lead with big runs like that. And basketball is a game of runs. And the Kings, credit to them, were knocking down great threes, both contested and uncontested threes that they were getting as a byproduct of the Thunder's defense. And ultimately, what was a porous first half. You go back and look at the shooting splits overall, they wind up like this: 40, 47, and 66 for Sacramento. 53, 59, and 80 for Oklahoma City. In the first half, they were terrible for Sacramento. First quarter especially, they were terrible for Sacramento. But that third quarter, they were excellent, the Kings were. And part of that is by design. Part of that is shooting variance. And part of that is just, the Kings having a great night. So shooting variance matters a lot when we're talking about three-point shooting. Even Boston, you've seen them miss wide open threes against Oklahoma City twice this season, where they had two of their worst three-point shooting games for a team that's really good at shooting threes. And then you've also seen teams like the Nets and the Spurs and the Kings in the third quarter, where teams that aren't shooting the ball well from three do shoot the ball well from three. So that's part of it. And that's what the shooting variance label is. Another part of it is what Mark admits. Like Mark talks about whenever he's asked like why this team gives up open threes, they prioritize the paint. And it's the NBA. You've got to prioritize something. And if I had to guess why that is, like if I had to guess why the Thunder prioritize the paint and why they do let up open threes, if everyone can acknowledge that these teams are so good nowadays and these players are so good nowadays that you can't shut everything off. The floor, the spacing's too good. It's too difficult to shut down everything, even for historically great defense like Oklahoma City. Then you'd rather prioritize the paint. Even though you have 2 7-footers on the court at times, you'd rather still prioritize the paint because the most efficient shots are the looks that you get clean closer to the rim. Whereas we just acknowledged that three-point shooting is inherently variable regardless of how well contested, regardless of defense, regardless of anything. Just night to night, it's the most volatile. Like no one would criticize the Celtics as a bad three-point shooting team. If you've only watched them play the Thunder, you think that they're a dreadful three-point shooting team because they've shot very poorly against Oklahoma City. But that's a 2-game sample size. That's a small sample size and a variance of they were bad those 2 nights. And the Thunder were exploding out to the contest, and they were on their P's and Q's defensively as well. So the Thunder do deserve credit for stifling and stymieing the Celtics, but part of it is just variant. So what I'm getting at here is if you sold out to stop the threes and you're contesting so hard that you're flying by shooters and they're able to drive to the rim, it's the NBA. Like you might end up on Shaqtin' a Fool every once in a while, but in reality, you give Boston, let's say 30 of their 63 threes were open. You give them 30 shots at the rim wide open, they're making all of them. Maybe you get lucky and they miss one. So part of it is by design that the Thunder do give up these 30s, and it was the case last year for PJ Washington. Like you were pulling your hair out whenever PJ Washington was knocking down threes. You go back and watch the finals of how Boston defended them. It's the exact same way that the Thunder defended Dallas. Only it worked because, say it with me, the variance of the three-point shooting. So that's kind of what the third quarter boiled down to. The Thunder, really all night, the Thunder were sloppier with the ball than they have been, which leads to their 15 turnovers, which is very eye-popping for this Thunder team specifically, who does not turn the ball over very much. So you already had a night where you were turning the ball over too much. You also had a third quarter where you couldn't score, and you also had a third quarter where the Kings were just on fire from three. And all of that compounds to that Kings run. And yet, right, after all that, it was the Thunder who grew a lead back up into the 20s and to 25 in that fourth quarter. And it was the double big lineups and Isaiah Joe and all these variables that we talk about that got the job done. Take nothing away from SGA, who had 32 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, had 5 turnovers. Again, the turnovers were too high. 9 for 10 from the free throw line, 45% shooting from the floor, 3 for 6 from 3. Like he ends up having a really good game, really good stat line. In the scope of taking away the box score and just watching the game happen, this was not even in the top 5 of the pantheon of Shea games, which is crazy to say because of how good that stat line was that I just read you out. But it's true. The turnovers were an issue. He had 2 points in the third quarter. I think he made it 5 with that 3 at the end. He was good in this game. There were just different lulls that occurred whenever he was on the floor. And then in the fourth quarter, he was able to extend the lead with the Thunder. He ends up a plus 13 in the plus minus. Isaiah Joe was a plus 22, right? Like this Thunder team was able to adapt to a slower Shea night that ended up fantastic, right? That ended up a really good box score from SGA because you had Isaiah Joe going 4 for 6 from 3. And we said it this week. If you grant a really good Isaiah Joe 3-point shooting night and 15 points off the bench for Alex Caruso, you're not going to beat this Thunder team. You're just not. You're just not, even without J-Dub, Wiggins, and Wallace, who would have provided a ton. those are those swing things that if you get those games and then you chip in 9 points from Jalen Williams, Jay Will, it's insurmountable. It's insurmountable. No matter who's at home, who's on the road, no matter what the refs are calling or refs aren't calling, no matter any of that. And the double big lineups really, really worked tonight and continue to show why the Thunder never wavered from playing them and why they're such an asset for Oklahoma City. And we're going to talk about that on this show coming up. But I thought Isaiah Joe deserves a lot of credit. I mean, the crossover step back three falling to the ground was electric. Kenrich Williams gets the start tonight, goes 3 for 4 from three, and has 11 points of his own. Lou Dort, 3 for 6. He only had one drive that I thought was questionable. The other drives were really good from him. And you continue to see him be a more under-controlled player than he's ever been. And that's been last year we said the same thing, right? So last year he was more under control than the first few years. This year he's more under control even than last year. And you could tell that on the Alex Caruso outlet pass to Lou Dort, where Lou Dort gets it. He's patient at the rim, lets the defender fall off his back, then goes up, gets the bucket. Whereas earlier in his career, you've seen him. Earlier in his career, Lou Dort would have rushed that shot and missed and blown the opportunity in transition, at the rim especially. This version of Lou Dort, highly efficient offense, excellent defender. He's really putting it all together to be a really winning player, which is what the Thunder have needed. You got good Dylan Jones minutes overall. You really did. There was a time in this game where Dylan Jones had a game high plus minus. Quick 5 points from him. Ends with that same number. But you got good Dylan Jones minutes in that first quarter. But Alex Caruso has really stepped up to be playing the best basketball of the season. And this is when you want Caruso to play the best basketball of the season. This is what it was all for. I don't want to say, I don't know how to phrase this. So this phrasing may be a bit harsh. But this is what the slow playing was all for, of monitoring his minutes. And we would be left wondering in the early part of the season, why didn't Caruso play more? Why didn't Caruso play more? And now, he won you the Clippers game. He outright won you the Clippers game, and he flipped this game against Sacramento. It is what it is. And Joel Lorenzi of the Oklahoman, friend of the show, had a great video of Alex Caruso coaching the guys up at a timeout. I have a video from a few home games. Well, at this point, a couple months ago, at a home game of he's not even in the game. He's on the sidelines and he's barking out orders as if he's Dave Bliss, as if he's an assistant coach. That's the maturity, leadership, extension of the coach on the floor, all that stuff that Caruso has, provides, and executes that you didn't have a year ago. And then on the court, he's been a very impactful player, especially these last two nights. And these last two nights that have felt like playoff games. These last few nights that have felt like you're going up against a desperate team, because you have been. The Clippers and the Kings. And that the crowds have been into it, and that the stakes have been higher, and that you've needed guys to step up because you just haven't had guys. And Caruso's been there. And if he's going to be there all playoff long, which you expect, then man, it's going to be exceptionally hard to beat this team 4 out of 7 times. So coming up, let's talk about the double big lineups. Let's talk about this Thunder outlook on the rest of the year and more. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. We're here talking Thunder basketball with you today after the Thunder won game number 60 and responded to adversity super well yet again. The key for this Thunder team, and the reason why I think that they're going to win the Western Conference, is that you've seen over the last two nights, teams giving it their best shot. And for the Clippers, playing their best basketball of the season, up until Sunday. And someone always fills the void. Someone always flips the game. Someone always steps up. And we're saying that about two games in which Sunday, you had massive rotational pieces out. Today, you had massive rotational pieces out. Two games we've been missing key contributors. And why I point that out is, yes, the Thunder are still good enough to win without key contributors. They've done that since October. They've done that since November. They've done that every step of the way. But they expect to have a fully healthy roster in April. And that gives them even more chances to find the guy who's going to step up through the course of a 48-minute game. And it's really hard to predict if you're just being completely objective and you're not going to fall onto crutches and narratives and past seasons and whatever, right? You're not going to hold on to anything except for what we've seen play out on the hardwood for 82 games at that point. And you're heading into the playoffs and you're talking about the playoffs and you're previewing the playoffs. You're really going to convince me that there will be 4 different games of a 7-game series where the Thunder can't flip through the Rolodex of this rotation and find 3 guys playing worth a damn? I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that on any given night, regardless of who those 3 players are, 4 players are, 5 players are, they're going to find those guys because they just have too many options. If it's not Isaiah Joe, it's Alex Caruso. If it's not Alex Caruso, it's Aaron Wiggins. If it's not J-Dub, it's Cason Wallace. If it's not Cason Wallace, it's big game Lou Dort. How in the world did he hit 9 threes? Like, they just have too many guys who are capable. And with the NBA system that is set up, where sometimes upsets happen, but very rarely, right? Sometimes they happen. But it's the very best format of crowning a champion because it's exceptionally hard for an underdog, scrappy, disadvantaged team, barring injury, to beat a simply, flatly better team. It's exceptionally hard. Again, injuries happen and some upsets happen, but by and large, the end result typically holds up with what we see in the regular season. There is no Cinderella story. Typically, they turn back into pumpkins. Is that the same fairy tale? I think it is. I didn't grow up watching many fairy tales. Perhaps it's part of my problem as a human. I did see a great rendition of Beauty and the Beast at the Muskogee Theater, oddly enough. The Roxy, they call it, I believe. That was a fun time. I'll be honest. I was not expecting to have a fun time. That was a fun time. Yeah, I've seen other renditions of fairy tales, I guess, down in Sherry's Dance Center in Lawton. Thanks to my sister, all state and dance, no big deal. But best athlete of the family, I'd say. But regardless, the Cinderella stories don't happen. That was the one that turned into a pumpkin, I think. And then it turned back into a pumpkin. The clock strikes midnight. I think that they turned it into pumpkins. I'll look it up after the show. I'm not going to edit any of this out, and I probably should. So ultimately, though, the Thunder are who we think they are. They are contenders. They should win the West, and they respond to adversity exceptionally well. They have the most talent, they respond to adversity, and they have the star power that you need to win a championship, to get to a championship, to win the West, etc. They check the boxes. The only box they don't check is that they've won a championship before. But guess what? Throughout the NBA history is littered with unique champions. Because guess what you have to do to get championship experience? You got to win a championship. It's no team's birthright to win a championship. So, we can lean into that idea, and I've talked about it before, but it's the easy approach because it takes no effort. You don't have to watch a single second of the NBA. If your only discount of a team is they've never done it before, can they really win it? They've never done it before. That takes zero effort. That takes zero take. That takes zero going out on a limb. That takes zero chutzpah. It takes zero. Because one team wins a title every single year. And with only one team winning the title, you're going to be right 99% of the time. And I use the two past champions as examples. You could never build around Jokic as your centerpiece for a title team because of the defense and he's soft and this, that, and the third until he won a title. And now we think that all of a sudden they're going to flip a switch in the playoffs and win a championship again. You couldn't build around the Jays. You got to split up the Jays. Do a Google search right now of the phrase split up the Jays. You will find a bajillion, not a bazillion, a bajillion articles about how Boston can't win with Tatum and Brown. They just can't do it. They keep getting there. They keep getting close. They keep having regular seasons that are really good, but they can't win the big one. Then go look up what ESPN and these other publications wrote this very night that Boston won last year. This is the start of the next NBA dynasty. This is the start of the Boston Renaissance, where they're going to restake their claim as title town and as this historic franchise that's not going to let titles go because they're bringing the band back together and they're going to do it again, and they might win a championship again. But that's the same team. That's the same guys. That's the same core. That's the same leadership that for 7 years you said couldn't win. And you got to take victory laps that they couldn't win. Then they do win, and you don't say, hand up, that's on me. I didn't think the Jays could do it. No, you say, okay, now my opinion is they're going to win every single championship from here on out. I don't see how this ends. And that's what this Thunder team is going to face. If they win it, they'll be the next dynasty. If they lose it, I don't think that this Thunder team can do it. Can Shea be the guy? Can these shooters really handle the pressure? Is J-Dub at number 2? That's how little effort it takes for these take makers out there to put together a quote unquote take. I can script it for you today on March 26th in the year of our Lord 2025, and I'll be 100% right. I guarantee you. I would bet my bank account. I'd bet dollars to donuts that the day the Thunder win or lose the championship, or win the championship and lose in the playoffs, that's the two paths. There's a fork in the road. Two roads are diverged by two takes. And everyone takes the road most traveled by. And that's what it is. I don't know where that was going. Double big lineups. They were really good tonight. So good, in fact, we're going to talk about it on tomorrow's show. We're going to lead the show off with it tomorrow. If you made it this far, you should know that tomorrow's show will be a mailbag podcast where we answer your questions about the Thunder, NBA, life, theater, fairy tales, music, Elvis movies, whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. So leave those comments on YouTube and leave them on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.